Good morning and welcome to Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church. We're so glad you're here. This morning's opening words come from Wendy Bartell and Lynn Gardner. From our separate joys and struggles, we come here to find the peace of balance, to find the blessing of restlessness. All are welcome to follow, to lead, to teach, to learn. All are welcome to join in the dance, to catch our breath. All are welcome to give generously, to receive gratefully. All are welcome. If we are steady and composed, if we feel completely lost, if we don't know what we're feeling, this community has a place for us. Here, we matter and we are loved. If you are steady and poised, if you feel completely lost, if you don't know what you feel, this community has a place for us. We matter. We are loved.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yes, again, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, whoever you are, ours is no caravan, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yes, again, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our great covenant.
I wrote this song 30 years ago so my friend Pat Lamana could give it this contemporary message. Gather in spirit, not face to face. Let's do what we can to flatten the curve. Wash your hands often and don't touch your face. This virus is something no one deserves. Gather on Skype, gather on Zoom, gather by phone with family and friends. Gather online, but don't leave your room. Let's all stay safe until this crisis ends. Gather on Facebook, but not for too long. There's so many ways to sweeten the time. Take up crochet, write a new song, read a good book, bake brownies sublime. Gather on Skype, gather on Zoom, gather by phone with family and friends. let's all stay safe until this crisis ends.
So this is the Earth. It's pretty big up close. The Earth's diameter is 41 million feet wide compared to the Sun's diameter, which is 4.5 billion feet wide. The Earth to the Sun in feet is 493 trillion feet. So to put this in kind of ratios, the Earth is roughly 109 times smaller than the Sun. And the distance from the Earth to the Sun is roughly 12,000 to 1. So these are really big numbers, and it's really hard to make sense of these really big numbers. Human brains have a hard time wrapping themselves around really big numbers. So let's take some perspective. Let's apply some perspective. If the Earth was very, very small, the size of this ballpoint pen right there on the very tip, that is roughly 0.02 inches. In comparison, the Sun would be about 2 inches wide, or roughly the size of a golf ball. I'm taking a little bit of liberty with the measurements here. And the distance from the Earth to the Sun would be about 20 feet. Roughly right there. This little tiny dot here is the Earth, and that pink golf ball is the Sun. Now, if we take that and make it just a little bit bigger, so if we said instead of the tip of the ballpoint pen, the Earth was the width of the tip of the closed ballpoint pen, so that's about 1/10 of an inch there. Just making that small difference, the relative size of the Earth to the Sun would be about 1/10 of an inch to about a foot. And the distance from the Earth to the Sun would be just a little bit farther. All right.
Okay, good.
Yep. The distance from the Earth to the Sun. Whoa, sorry. The distance from the Earth to the Sun would be.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Maybe go that way a little bit so you stay in the shot. All the way. Woo! That's good. Woo! So, the distance from the Earth, which is about 1/10 of an inch wide, to the Sun, the orange ball way back there, would be about 100 feet. Now, making that just a little bit bigger. Come on back, Keith. If we make it just a little bit bigger, and again, I'm taking a little bit of liberty with these measurements, but if the Earth were the size of this ball, the Sun would be about the size of the Sun sphere in downtown Knoxville. And the distance from the Earth to the Sun would be about the distance from Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church to World's Fair Park. These are really, really, really big numbers. And the relative size of the Earth to the Sun is really, really small. In 1990, NASA's Voyager 1 was about 4 billion miles from Earth when it turned its camera back towards the planet and took a picture. The picture you see on your screen right now is that photo. It's very, very blurry, but when it was introduced in 1990 by Carl Sagan, He unveiled the image and called it the pale blue dot. And he said, "That's here. That's home. That's us." In 2013, NASA's Cassini mission retook this photo when it was close to Saturn. It turned its camera back towards Earth and gave us another picture of that pale blue dot. And as we close this time for all ages, to paraphrase Carl Sagan, that's our home, the tiny pale blue dot floating in space. No matter what terrible things we may face, the Earth is where we make our stand.
Joy! The joys and concerns today can be based on this one statement. One moment can change a life, and one life can change the world. Although we have not received specific joys and concerns this week, I do want to raise that there are people healing from procedures who are trying to get stronger and to be well again. There are people who are struggling and afraid about what the future will bring regarding finances, rent. There are people who are disengaging and trying to be peaceful and kind to each other. There are many things that are happening in the world, and you can be that one moment that can change a life by offering peace or a hug or just saying, "I will be a quiet presence for you." And that one moment can change that one life, and that one life can change the world. So I offer you this opportunity to go forward with joys and concerns and to seek them where you can do the best and give your best. Joy.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us here at TVUUC. My name is Claudia Presley, and I'm the Director of Administration here. Today is a Share the Plate Sunday. What Share the Plate means is that any contribution that comes in today that is not marked as a pledge will go to our organization for today's offering. That organization is the Highlander Center. The Highlander Center is located in Newmarket, Tennessee. It was founded in 1932. Its purpose then and now is to give people the resources and the education to fight economic, social, and environmental causes. You can find out more information about the Highlander Center at their website, highlandercenter.org. The ways you can give today are by going to tvuuc.org/give, or you can text give to the number 73256, type in TVUUC and the amount. So once again, thank you for joining us. If you have the resources to give, please give generously to help this organization. Thank you.
Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you lie, I will lie, beloved. Where you lie, I will lie. Where you lie, I will lie, beloved. Where you lie, I will lie. Your people are my people. Your people are my You're divine, my divine.
Where you go, I will go, children.
Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, children. Where you go, I will go. Where you lie, I will lie, children. Where you lie, I will lie. Where you lie, I will lie, children. Where you lie, I will lie. Your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. You're divine, my divine. Your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. You're divine, my divine. You're divine, my divine. You're divine, my divine.
They Raised Big Gardens by Susan Odell Underwood.
They Raised Big Gardens by Susan Odell Underwood.
Because not all of us learned every man for himself, not even during hard times.
Because not everyone can raise up himself, much less raise vegetables.
Because the ground was created in the first place to feed everybody.
Because their everyday talent was to bend with a bowed head, to kneel down.
Because there is no room for selfishness in subsistence.
Because 3 meals a day is not necessity.
But it is a necessary dignity.
Because going hungry is a better teacher than any sermon about doing unto.
Because hunger feels like unjust punishment, just for walking, breathing, being.
Because there can always be a little left at the bottom of every pot.
Because who gets to eat should not be a lottery.
Because we must all put in front of ourselves, on the table, something to bless, by which to be blessed.
Because the table is always ready and waiting, like a promise.
Because each mouth goes empty most hours of the day and needs only a bite to fill it.
Because tomorrow is too far to go on an empty stomach.
Because the first thing we all know is the pang of hunger.
Because among the innards, the taste buds are sanctified.
A gift, a prodding way down deep to stay alive.
Because it only took a few more seeds to plant 3 more short rows.
Because the mule wasn't completely worn out.
Because it cost them only sweat and ache and the effort of walking on those last few clods in someone else's shoes.
Because the sun held the pages of June open.
Promising fishes and loaves.
Fishes and loaves.
Fishes and loaves.
The light saying,
Multitudes.
Beatitudes.
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 Saying this do.
In the name of.
For who so loved?
The meek will inherit.
Saying, do unto the least of these.
Saying, unto us is given.
Unto you is born this day.
This very 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 day.
standing on these mountains and plain, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor nor port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue home. Sun my sail and moon my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, read the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor nor port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue home. Wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue home.
A few years ago, I took a course in seminary on the Hebrew Scriptures that made me mad. It made me mad because some of the texts that we covered were problematic for my own personal theology. One of the texts in particular was the story of Noah's Ark in Genesis 6 and 7. Now, for those who may or may not be familiar with this story, Noah's Ark is a story about a God who looks down on the earth and is just in utter despair for how corrupt and evil the world has become. And God's solution to dealing with this evil was to send a great flood to wipe out all life on earth. But one person, Noah, and his family found favor with God. And so God gives Noah instructions on how to build a great big ship, or an ark, that will save him and his family and 2 of every kind of animal on the earth. So Noah builds the ark, and it carries him and his family safely through 40 days and 40 nights of tempest and storm, and all of the animals are saved, and Noah and his family are saved because of this ark. Now, what made me mad about the course that we took was the way that the professor extrapolated this story. He took this story and applied it to the climate crisis and said that this story is a good metaphor for how the climate crisis is. The earth has ignored the natural order of things. Human beings have become corrupt and not tuned in to the divine and the natural world. And there's a big flood coming, a big crisis, a big calamity. And not much of humanity is going to survive it. And this just made me so angry. And I couldn't understand why until I went out into the hallway with a friend of mine and we were talking about it. And he said, maybe you're not mad that it's raining. Maybe you're mad that the boat is too small. There's a saying that was going around in the early days of the COVID-19 quarantine earlier this year. We're all in the same boat. The idea being that this current pandemic has leveled the playing field, so to speak, and everybody's on the same boat. Everybody's dealing with the same problems and the same issues. But people were quick to point out that, in fact, we all have different levels of privilege and need that make our experiences of this pandemic different. Now, over 6 months into the pandemic, we have seen sharply that while we are all, in fact, facing the same storm, the same flood, the same pandemic, we're in wildly different boats. The immunocompromised fear their fellow human beings who ignore science and the advice of experts. Millions have lost their livelihoods, while some unemployed are able to access benefits, many are not. And even those who do have some legal protections, because of the timing of this service this morning, they may have lost it by the time this sermon airs on Sunday. Some parents have the ability to keep their children at home as the school year begins this fall. And some parents have no choice but to send their children to school because the alternative is losing a job that provides food and shelter for their family. Me personally, I can stay home and work on my computer all day, safe from the rest of the world, while my husband and my mom and my other family members who work in healthcare have to think of a level of risk that doesn't even cross my mind some days. Some days it doesn't feel like we're all in the same boat, but millions of tiny little ones. And there's a level of anxiety in the world right now that feels like there's something in the water circling, getting ready to strike. In the words of the movie Jaws, we're going to need a bigger boat. Thinking back to the story of Noah and the ark and my own heritage from the Christian tradition, I'm reminded of the ways in which the church has been viewed as a kind of ark. And this week I came across the work of Christian theologian Joe R. Jones, who basically says that there are two old ways of thinking about the church as a kind of salvation or ark, and he proposes a new one. The first is a traditional view. A traditional view of the church as the salvation of the world looks at the church as the holder of some sacred truth. And only the followers of that sacred truth and only the people who know that sacred truth and follow the teachings of the church are going to be the ones who are saved. This is in contrast, he says, to the liberal approach to churches. In this approach, everyone is saved, and you can believe whatever you want. Does this sound familiar? What Jones proposes instead of either the traditional view or the liberal view of the church is a revised, perhaps what some would call a post-liberal view of the church that looks at the church as a theological endeavor, which is to say that our congregations, our small communities of faith, are places where we engage deeply with our own personal theologies. He goes on to say that theology is a language of sorts, that treating our faith as a language or our personal theology as a language, we can approach our own theology as important and practical to our own understanding of the world, while at the same time realizing that there is space for other languages and other theologies out there. For those who don't know, I have a background in linguistics, and this just is right up my alley, thinking about theology as a kind of language. Shifting gears for a second back away from the Christian church to a more Unitarian Universalism as we understand it today, This new vision of the saving power of a church sounds very similar to what the Commission on Institutional Change talked about earlier this year at General Assembly. For those who may be unfamiliar, in 2017, our movement created the Commission on Institutional Change, and I'm going to link it in the comments because it is very, very important that Unitarian Universalists know about the work of this commission. This commission was charged with supporting long-term cultural and institutional change that redeems the essential promise and ideals of Unitarian Universalism. Just a few weeks ago, at the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly, the Commission on Institutional Change presented their final report, called Widening the Circle of Concern. It was the culmination of 3 years of intense study of the current state of Unitarian Universalism and what it needs. In my opinion, the entire report should be required reading for every Unitarian Universalist, but there's a section of the report that I want to highlight for the purposes of today's discussion. It's a section called simply Theology. In that section, the Commission writes, "Yet, over the decades, since the consolidation of Unitarians and Universalists into the Unitarian Universalist Association, an overemphasis on individual exploration and experience as the primary, if not sole, center of the religious experience developed. And as a result," they write, "justice-seeking practices of Unitarian Universalists are often not grounded on spiritual or ritual principles. Instead, justice-seeking takes the place of ritual and religious life. Justice practices cannot be used as surrogates for deepening our spiritual lives." Which is to say that in Unitarian Universalism, our fourth principle talks about a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And in the past, we focused only on that free part and not the responsible part. The responsibility not just to ourselves and understanding our own theology with integrity, but also what our personal theology calls us to in relationship to others in our own congregations. To develop not only a personal practical theology, but a practical theology that fits into our congregations as well. The Commission quotes Unitarian Universalist theologian Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt saying, "We are the theological inheritors of teachings on universal salvation. There is no winnowing out of the supposedly unworthy that can be named sacred among us. It is our very universalism that is at stake when we turn away from the impact that our institutions have on the same communities and groups that society encourages us to dehumanize and make small." In the words of the Commission, those most harmed by the divisive and stressful times we live in are in need of faith tenets that hold us fast in confusing times and help us make ethical and values-based choices on how to engage. Our faith, our Unitarian Universalist faith, theologically rooted, can be an arc of salvation of sorts. An arc that looks at the world and sees not the location where salvation can happen, but the very living thing that can be saved. This little speck that we talked about in the story for all ages, the time for all ages, this little speck floating through space that, in the words of the poet, was created in the first place to feed everybody, is our ark. In times like these, I have to believe the words of Theodore Parker, so often quoted that the arc of the universe bends towards justice. But if Parker was talking about the ark, A-R-C, I want to adjust that a little bit and talk about the ark, A-R-K, the earth, our blue boat home, as our ark. In times like these, it's easy to fall into despair. And sometimes we need to. Sometimes the state of the world sucks, and our bodies need a healthy dose of vitamin lament. It's okay to be saddened and despairing right now for the world. But we don't have to stay in that place of lament. In times like these, there may not be much that we can do to stop the world from changing, because we're going to come out on the other side of this flood and the one after that in a completely different world than the one we saw before. But if we're willing to ground ourselves in theological understanding, listening to the needs of those around us, we can hear that promise of fishes and loaves when we donate our time, our money, our resources to food banks in our communities. We can see the light saying multitudes of lives saved in our communities because we stayed home when we could, wore our masks when we went out in public so that we didn't become a vector of illness. Saying beatitudes, blessed are the healthcare workers, the essential jobs, the medical and scientific experts. Saying this do, whatever you can, right where you are, and that will be enough. In the name of a just theology, not justice as theology, but a theology that is just. For who so loved, the meek will inherit. Our children will bear witness to the choices that we make. Saying, do unto the least of these. Saying, help the laid off. Feed the hungry, give shelter to the tired, comfort to the lonely. Saying, unto us is given this opportunity to fight ignorance, to fight injustice, and know why. To love a broken world right in our own backyard. And when we feel powerless, helpless, restless, to realize that unto us is born this day, this very day. May we make it so in our world. Blessed be, and amen.
Mingle my calling with all
Prophetic Church, the world awaits your liberating theology. Go forward in the power of love. Proclaim the truth that makes us free. As our last act of worship, I invite you to call, text, or write your neighbor.